Haha! Pranked! You thought I was going to be reviewing A Star is Born. Nope, we're talking about Cabin in the Woods. Although that might just be me saying that because my plans to go see A Star is Born tonight got canceled and so I gotta review it tomorrow. But you know what? That's probably it, and that's the way the cookie crumbles. But either way, guys, I'm excited to talk to you about Cabin in the Woods. It's October. It is the time of month to talk about Halloween and horror movies. And Cabin in the Woods is just, it's awesome. It's one of my all-time favorites. And it's actually one of the first horror films I originally watched. Have I only seen it a couple times? Yeah, but there is a lot to love in here. First of all, Cabin in the Woods is exactly what you think a horror slasher film would be. It's about a bunch of college students who go out to the middle of nowhere, who go out to a cabin in the middle of a forest, in the middle of a deserted forest, and then malicious evil things start coming after them and start brutalizing them. It's the same story as The Evil Dead, except with a really amazing twist to it. The way this film deconstructs, takes apart, and celebrates horror movies all in one little experience is fantastic. And me personally, I don't think there's been another film out there that has done it for horror movies. Maybe it's done it for sci-fis or romantic comedies, sure, but not for horror movies. And the casting in here is just brilliant. First, you have Christina Connelly, who plays the main girl in this movie. You have Chris Hemsworth, who plays the stereotypical what you think would be a jock in this kind of scenario. And then you have the guy who smokes way too much weed. And then what's really interesting about this is that you have two businessmen type who are essentially pulling all the strings in this scenario. And one of those businessmen type is Bradley Whitford. Honestly, Bradley Whitford, you saw him in Get Out. He's in this movie. He was great in Get Out. He's phenomenal in Cabin in the Woods. This was my first and probably a lot of people's introduction to Bradley Whitford as an actor. I know it was for me personally. And he's just amazing in here. He's slick and he just so comes across like a casual, really over-the-top, arrogant businessman type, but you can't help but have kind of a love-hate relationship with the guy. And that really comes down to the writing in Cabin in the Woods. In my personal opinion, yes, this was Drew Goddard's directorial debut, and it is a brilliant directorial debut. This film is masterful, but the real masterwork of this film is the screenplay and the way it was constructed, because so much of this dialogue, so much of the way the film unfolds, it not only feels natural, but it also feels natural in the sense that every character, whenever they have a conversation with somebody else in the same room, it feels like a very natural conversation. It feels like a conversation that you might have with your coworkers, your friends, what have you. Because there's a lot of small talk, and although there is some establishing dialogue to find out where everybody is coming from in this movie, it doesn't actually feel like stereotypical cliche horror movie setup like you would regularly get. And of course, how can I forget that it's not just Drew Goddard that wrote the screenplay for this. It's also in part to Joss Whedon. And Joss Whedon, as we've all seen from Firefly, from The Avengers, from Dollhouse, that Joss Whedon really knows how to write characters realistically, and he knows how to make really, really good humor. Is the humor in Cabin in the Woods dark? Yeah, it's a very dark comedy. But all of the humor for me landed. Are there some very strange parts in this movie? Oh yeah, if I told you that nothing in Cabin in the Woods made me scratch my head both times that I've seen it, then that would be a full-out bold-faced lie. But at the end of the day, the weird things in this movie, they still worked for me. To tell you the truth, I don't think there was anything in this film that didn't work for me. And my favorite parts of it were when they deconstructed horror movies. I mean, there might be a whiteboard filled with every horror movie monster that you can imagine. There might be the stereotypical construction of what you would think would go on when it comes to a certain cliche group of teenagers that go out in the middle of the woods. And there might be a crickety, creepy basement that leads down and leads these kids to a bunch of items. They have no idea what's going on. But everything was beautiful. If you couldn't already tell my love for Cabin in the Woods, I implore you, even if you're not a horror movie fan, Cabin in the Woods is one of those films I do recommend because although it is a horror movie in essence, it does celebrate that. It is a film that is filled with enough comedic levity that it takes away some of the suspension in a really creative and really great way. Besides the Babadook, I'll say that this is It's one of my favorite horror movies, and I think it's one of the best to come out this decade for sure. Well, you guys know my thoughts on Cabin in the Woods, so you can probably estimate what my rating is going to be in here. I'm going to say that Cabin in the Woods is suit-worthy. Alright guys, first of all, thank you so much once again for showing up. The support, it means everything to me, and I love giving you guys these videos. Like I said, I'm planning to give my review of A Star is Born up tomorrow. Plans had to change, unfortunately, but that's not what's important. What's important is your thoughts. So have you seen Cabin in the Woods? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Or are you indifferent because you just haven't seen it? Whatever your thoughts are, put them down in those comments section. Let's get that conversation started. And as always, if you want to see more reviews and content from me, you can click right up there at the very top of the screen. If you want to see myself along with my great friend Zach Pope deconstruct film, talk a little bit about video games and TV shows, click right down there. Originally to the Sweet Film Podcast, which is now the Sweet Podcast. Click right there, and if you want to subscribe, you know what? I'll just finish off here. If you like what you've seen here and you want to see more, click right there and subscribe and become part of the fray of nerds who love cinema. You all have a fantastic day.